Good day, everyone. This is Crime Talk, and my name is Scott Reich. It's New Year's Day, so everybody's got to do the obligatory year in review. We've had a lot of cases that we've talked about over the years, but obviously a couple more stand out. Here's the highlights. Enjoy. Did Richard Allen's wife turn him in? That's right. Richard Allen is the man accused in the Delphi homicides. Well, he was arrested last week for the 2017 double slaying of the teens Liberty, Germany, and Abigail, Abby Williams. And they worked and lived in the same community as Mr. Allen. Now, Allen has been charged with 2 counts of murder for their killing. And the police say this is a major break in the mysterious homicides that have basically baffled investigators for nearly 6 years. Now, the suspect has absolutely no criminal history and worked as a pharmacy technician at the local CVS in town, which is Delphi, and they have 3,000 people in the town. You think somebody would have recognized something, right? We'll talk about that in a second. But as I noted, this guy has no criminal history. He has almost nothing when somebody runs a background check on this guy. He is so plain boring. It's unbelievable. I mean, what do we know about the guy? He's never been arrested. He has a modest home worth roughly $140,000. He drives 2 Ford Focuses built back in 2010 and 2011. Like I said, his house built in 1999, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, a rough value of $142,000. This guy's just an everyday Joe, and now he's accused regarding the Delphi murder. Now, as we've noted, the girl's disappearance on February 13th after a hike on the Monon High Bridge Trail. They were reported missing that night, and their bodies were found in the woods the next day in a wooded area about a half mile from the railroaded bridge. Now, investigators searched Allen's home 2 weeks ago, focusing on the property, and apparently there's a fire pit on the property. Now, the search yielded some evidence that led to his arrest, okay? The police just didn't randomly decide to go over to Mr. Allen's house. There had to be something that led them to him. After nearly 6 years, what could it have been? Now, there's been some, I don't want to use the word speculation, but some people have suggested that perhaps the wife was the one that found something, called the police. The police got an affidavit for a search warrant. They found more information, and then, well, here we are. So Mr. Allen appeared before the Carroll County Circuit Court, entered a plea of not guilty, and a tentative trial date has been set for early next year, and Mr. Allen is being held without bond, and the sealed probable cause affidavit and charging documents also have not been released in this particular case. Now, I know the police want to protect the integrity of the investigation, but it makes you wonder a couple of questions. Why? Are they not confident? Are they not sure what they're looking for is going to come back as to what they're looking for? Or is there somebody else involved? I don't know. I'm leaning towards somebody found something out, contacted the police, and then here we are. Let me know what you think, or if you have a tip or an idea of what may take place. Let's go ahead and talk about Richard Allen and the Delphi murders. Well, there's information coming out that the murdered Delphi teenagers, Liberty German and Abigail Williams, were victims of a botched kidnapping plot hatched by members of a local child ring. Wasn't in the affidavit, so we're going to take this with a little bit of grain of salt. But like I said, there's reports come just 2 weeks after the affidavit had been released and was redacted, very limited, that ultimately resulted in the arrest of Richard Allen. And he's obviously been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murders that allegedly took place 5 years ago regarding Libby and Abby, where the bodies were found in Delphi, Indiana, back on February 13th of 2017. So these reports that came out are information's coming about that the reason why the police were digging in Mr. Allen's backyard is because they were digging up the alleged family cat. And they were looking, the authorities were looking for hair that may prove to be a match for samples found on one of the victims, allegedly. Now, the Carroll County prosecutor, Nicholas McClellan, has openly stated that he believes Allen is not the only actor involved in this case. And while Allen has not been charged with kidnapping, the prosecutors have alleged he attempted a kidnapping. Well, apparently now sources, purport to be close to the investigation, have claimed that Mr. Allen was acting with at least 2 other men and was involved in this child sex ring. Now, as you may recall, Keegan Klein of Peru, Indiana, who's currently awaiting trial on several charges of possessing images of children, was cooperating with the state police and prosecutors, obviously in an attempt to reduce his own charges and make his own situation better. Now, the sources say that the girls met Keegan Klein online and he arranged to meet them near the bridge that day, but didn't go. Instead, he set them up to be kidnapped for this child ring. Now, during one of the several police interviews, Keegan Klein admitted to soliciting underage girls for pictures by catfishing them, obviously posing as a teenage girl by the name of Emily Ann or a hunky model actor by the name of Anthony Schatz. It was apparently the name Anthony Schatz that he communicated with Libby German. Now, Schatz was one of the last people to communicate with the girls before they took their last walk on the Delphi Monon High Bridge Trail. Now, police interrogating Klein told him that they did not believe that he committed the murders, but was protecting the identity of whomever in fact did commit the murders. Well, now this alleged source has revealed that Klein has cut a deal with the prosecutors. And as you may recall, the search warrant for Allen's home and property were carried out based upon Keegan's alleged information. The Indiana State Police Carroll County spokesperson, a guy by the name of Sergeant Jeremy Piers, would neither confirm nor deny any of these details that were asked of him. Law enforcement has not released any of those details, anything beyond what is in the probable cause statement. Now, this source claims that Klein, from whose device police retrieved a slew of inappropriate photographs, knows Allen and that the men met when both lived in Peru, Indiana, roughly 40 miles northwest of Delphi, Indiana. This source is also claiming that both men knew Ron Logan, who police first pegged as a suspect in the killings after the girls' bodies were found on his property some 1,400 feet from his home. And an FBI search warrant served on Logan's home and property dated March 17th of 2017 revealed that on February 14th, the day after the killings, Mr. Logan asked a relative to provide him with a false alibi. Now, Logan had told a cousin to say that a friend had picked him up and taken him to a fish store between 2 and 2:30 p.m. and that he didn't return home until about 5:30 p.m. The last time the girls were known to be alive was about 2:13 p.m. when German made a brief cell phone recording of the now infamous bridge guy approaching and the words allegedly saying, "Guys, down the hill." Now, Logan's alibi was shown to be a lie, and text messages retrieved from his phone showed that he was out of his house and in the vicinity of the murders on the evening of February 13th. Now, the FBI affidavit that was released noted that Logan asked his relatives to lie for him the following morning before the crimes were even discovered. Logan died at the age of 84 on January 24th of 2022 and was never named as an official suspect. But these sources are now claiming that Logan, who had a history of violence against women, was also now involved. According to this source, investigators believe that the plan had been for Allen to kidnap the girls and bring them to Logan's home, where he and allegedly Klein would then do inappropriate things with them. The girls were apparently supposed to be kidnapped for the sex ring, but something went wrong and they were knifed and sexually assaulted and almost decapitated, according to this source. Logan and Klein apparently never met the girls. Police had been pretty tight-lipped about the girl's cause of death, saying only that there was a lot of blood at the scene. Now, the murder weapon was a knife, apparently, and that both girls bled out. This source has also revealed that the girls were killed near the river, information that has since been confirmed, but then moved and posed naked under a tree. While the FBI search warrant served on Logan's home also included law enforcement belief that the killer may have taken souvenirs. This source allegedly states that the souvenir was underwear and a cell phone that were taken from the scene. Now, the released probable cause affidavit also reveals that one of the girls could be heard saying the word gun. And according to this source, the killer was wearing a gun in his waistband. We've noted, and we've discussed this, that a Sig Sauer model P226, as well as several knives, were retrieved from Allen's home. In fact, Allen's wife, Kathy, confirmed that the weapons that were retrieved were in fact his. Now, forensic testing has been done of the unspent round found near the girls' bodies, and it showed that it had been cycled through Allen's gun, according to the affidavit. We've done videos about the reliability of that, but take it for what it's worth. Now, according to the probable cause affidavit, even though the bullet had never been fired, there were apparently significant signs and unique enough to say that it was in Allen's weapon. Now, the affidavit also states between October 14th of 2022 and October 19th of 2022, the Indiana State Police Laboratory performed an analysis of the Sig Sauer P226. The laboratory performed a physical examination and the classification of the firearm, function test, barrel, and overall length, measurement, test firing, ammunition, component, characterizations, microscopic comparison, and the NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. The laboratory determined that the unspent round within 2 feet of the victim's 2 bodies had been cycled through Mr. Richard M. Allen's Sig Sauer model P226. Although the affidavit also states that it is very subjective when it comes to this type of analysis. And when asked about the firearm and the round by investigators to Mr. Allen, he could not explain how a bullet got from his gun would have been there. He denied ever having been on the property or having ever lent his gun to anyone. Now, Mr. Allen has obviously denied the allegations and any involvement whatsoever in the killing of Libby and Abby, though he admitted to police that he was at the trail on the day that the girls went missing. And additionally, there were several youngsters that had seen him, allegedly, near where the murders had taken place. Now, his lawyers say that he's simply the wrong guy, and they've dismissed the probable cause affidavit as flimsy, as have I. And I say that because, the source that's coming out with this information isn't the police. And my experience is normally the police put all the good information in the affidavit. And if there's bad information, like, ooh, we got it wrong, we accused somebody else before, that also has to go in the affidavit. That goes directly to probable cause. And like I said, the defense also says none of the case was flimsy, but they refer to the unspent bullet as the magic bullet, and that the science involved in making the magic bullet was junk science. And Mr. Allen's attorneys have filed for a change of venue, which would more than likely, in fact, be granted given the high likelihood of all the publicity. It'd be unlikely that they'd be able to obtain a jury pool in the county in which the case is currently charged. It more than likely will not take place in Carroll County. Now, there's also a motion for a bond hearing on February 17th, and a trial date is set for March 20th of 2023. Let's have a show of hands who thinks that it'll actually go to trial on March 20th of 2023. For the record, my hand did not go up. I think I saw a couple of them, but not many, so I wouldn't count on it. Given the fact that the court just recently approved the defense request for expert funds so that they can retain experts, my guess is it's going to take a little longer to be prepared, and they're not going to be ready by March 20th. But hey, stranger things have happened. We'll let you know. We'll see if this source of this information is correct. If it is in fact correct, it could be bad, and we'll just have to wait and see if old Mr. Keegan Kline is endorsed as a witness for the prosecution. The Idaho student investigation. what you need to know. All right, the stabbing murders of 4 friends from the University of Idaho while they slept has obviously sent shockwaves throughout not only that small college town in Idaho, but the rest of the country. Now, after partying at separate locations, all of the under 22 victims were killed at their off-campus home in the dead of night in a motiveless slaying. Now, local police and the FBI have examined thousands of pieces of evidence and hundreds of tips, but 2 weeks after the deaths, haven't announced a suspect or located the murder weapon. And with a killer on the loose, many students have declined to return to the university for the final week of the semester. And the father of one of the victims says that he's, a little frustrated by the police's response in this particular case. So what do we know so far that we can actually say that we know? Not speculation, all right? So Kaylee Goncalves, she graduated from Lake City High School in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho in 2019 and attended the University of Idaho. She has been to high school with another victim, Madison Mogan, who was her best friend. Now, Goncalves shared a photo with her roommate hours before her murder, writing, "One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people." Now, Goncalves was studying in the College of Letters of Arts and Sciences and was majoring in general studies. Then we have Madison Mogan. She was 21. She apparently worked multiple jobs, did extremely well in school, and somehow always was able to find time to prioritize her friends and family. Now, Mogan had been dating Jake Schreiger, whose world has been turned upside down by her death, and Mogan was majoring in marketing and was a member of the Pi Beta Phi sorority. Then we have Zaina Kernodle. She was 20 years old. Now, according to the university, Kernodle was a junior studying marketing and a member of the sorority Pi Beta Phi. Now, Zaina had also been dating Ethan Chapman, who was also murdered at the same time she was. Now, Ethan Chapman was 20. Now, he was a freshman majoring in recreational sports and tourism management and was one of a set of triplets, all of whom attended the University of Idaho. He was a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity, and before the murders, the friends spent their Saturday night partying like many college students do. Now, Chapin and Kernodle went to a gathering at his fraternity and were home around 1:45 a.m. Goncalves and Mogan went to a local bar called the Corner Club. They left there about 1:30 a.m. They stopped at a late-night food truck where they chatted with others online while waiting for their food. At approximately 1:30 a.m., the pair were caught on camera purchasing a portion of the carbonara pasta from Grub Wandering Kitchen, a food truck that offers late-night eats on the weekends. Parked up close to the Moscow branch of the State Farm Insurance Company and outdoor store Hyper Spud Sports, Madison and Kaylee were last glimpsed walking away towards what police have called a private party driver for their final ride home. Now, the rideshare driver, who has been eliminated as a suspect, drove the two students home, and they arrived just before 2 a.m. Now, the route that they drove takes them less than 5 minutes to complete and cuts through the University of Idaho campus and actually passes the Sigma Chi house on the right where Zaina and Ethan spent their last night before taking a left up King Road towards their home. The drive also goes past the Moscow Police Department headquarters, which can be seen on the left just as the route turns right onto the campus. Now, according to the police, the pair arrived home at about 1:45 at the same time Ethan and Zaina, and 45 minutes after their other roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, who survived the attack. Now, less than 2 hours later, Madison, Kaylee, Zaina, and Ethan were dead. Now, the autopsy results showed that all 4 died from stab wounds to the chest, with police saying that the murder weapon was largely a large military-style knife, which has not been found. What we do know is that once home, Goncalves called her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Jack DeCoeur, 7 times between 2:26 and 2:52 a.m., but he didn't answer because he was asleep. Now, police have ruled out DeCoeur as a suspect. Now, the 4 murdered students were found on the 2nd and 3rd floor of their home, but the 2 roommates living on the ground floor, Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen, were spared. It's unclear why the two roommates were not harmed and if they slept through the attacks. Funk and Mortensen had been out that night and arrived home just after 1 a.m., the morning of the murder. Now, the first Dylan and Bethany knew of their roommate's fate came after about 11 a.m. when they woke up and went upstairs to find them dead. Neither had spoken publicly about the murders, but have showed off matching tattoos to commemorate their fallen friends. It has also emerged that murdered roommates Kaylee's dog, Murphy, was at the house when the police responded about midday. However, authorities have not confirmed if they believe the dog was in the house at the time of the homicides. And police have yet to locate a murder weapon, as we noted, but they are believed to be seeking a fixed blade knife, possibly a K-bar styled combat knife. We can show you a picture of one of those. Now, the Moscow Building Supply General Manager, a guy by the name of Scott Judas, has said that police officers stopped by the retailer a few times in the week following the murders to ask if they had sold any knives of that type. They didn't sell that particular K-bar style knife. Now, police have noted that they have processed more than 1,000 tips, collected 103 pieces of evidence, conducted almost 100 interviews, and taken more than 4,000 photographs of the crime scene. Now, police maintain that the murders were a targeted attack, but admitted they are still no closer to identifying the murderer today than they were the morning of the murders. Police, like I said, have admitted there's no suspects and they have not recovered a weapon. Police say that they are not releasing a profile that they're developing of the suspect because it could lead to more fear and suspicion in the college town, which is already on edge following the homicides, with some students not returning to finish classes in person. It's been suggested that the killer likely entered the 2,300 square foot home between 3 and 6 a.m. through a sliding door and made their way through 3 bedrooms, carrying out their knife killings, something that's very up close and personal when it comes with a knife. Now, Goncalves and Mogan were killed on the 3rd floor, while Chapin and Kernodle were killed in a bed they shared on the 2nd floor. None of the victims showed any signs of any sort of sexual assault, and that's according to the police reports. And as we've noted, no motive yet is identified for why the murders took place. So the police don't know who's responsible for the killings, but they have ruled out a slew of suspects, including Goncalves' ex-boyfriend, Mr. Decour, the man seen with Goncalves and Mogan at the food truck, the person who drove the 2 girls home, the surviving 2 roommates, Mortensen and Funk, and the victims themselves, as there is no evidence of a murder-suicide, and the friends summoned to the house by the surviving roommates on the morning of November 13th. Now, rumors have circulated that Goncalves had said that she had a stalker, but police have been unable to substantiate that claim. And police have taken a little bit of heat for their lack of development of leads in this particular case. They've also waffled on their communication to the public, first saying they didn't believe there's an ongoing community risk, even though they kind of walked that statement back a little bit, because obviously the community is at risk because somebody committed 4 homicides and they haven't been apprehended. I would say that's a risk. Police also said that they don't know if the murderer fled or is hiding in plain sight there in Moscow, Idaho. Now, police say that they have now mostly finished investigating the crime scene and that they have plans to release the scene back to the owner of the property, but noted that it won't be released until the police are positive that there is nothing left to retrieve from the crime scene. That's right. They have to collect things of evidentiary value. And sometimes collecting nothing is something of evidentiary value. I know. Yes. Particularly for the defense in this particular case. Now most of the police work is being done behind the scenes, specifically the crime lab testing that's taking place. Now, police have done 150 interviews, they've stated, and the information that is being received is building what they believe to be the whole picture. Obviously, since they don't have a suspect at this time and they don't have a weapon or an eyewitness, it's a little difficult to figure out exactly what happened. So, since the police don't have that witness, they have to try and build what they believe is the picture of what occurred on the night. They have to look at the relationships of the 4 victims. Was there anything suspicious in any of those relationships? Are there any tidbits of information that they can draw from that and try to develop something of evidentiary value that could provide a suspect or some motive as to the killings? They're going to have to look and see if was there anything that occurred that particular evening, or was it something that had been brewing for a while? And obviously they have to look at all the movements of the residents themselves. So that means basically everyone is a suspect until they are not a suspect. Now remember, many of the students were allowed to finish their classes and not return. So if the alleged perpetrator was a student, what a great way to stay away. If the perpetrator lives in the area, literally hiding in plain sight, unless there is some physical evidence or some sort of statement or admission made to somebody, I would think that suspect, that potential suspect, the perpetrator, is probably feeling pretty comfortable right about now. We'll keep you updated on any new developments. Now, I would like to say that I was going to be wrong, but I'm not. I would like to say that I have the exact motion in front of me so that I could go through it and explain it to you. But unfortunately, I can't, because the Idaho court system will let us have a copy of the motions in the Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow matters when they are gosh darn good and ready, and not a moment sooner. In today's technology, you can't just post something immediately. No, you got to wait 3-5 days, maybe weeks before it gets there. Well, guess what? That's right. Chad Daybell, through his attorney, has filed a motion to continue the jury trial, which is scheduled to start in January, at least until next fall. Sometime in October is what Mr. Pryor, the attorney for Chad Daybell, is asking for. And in addition to that, he's renewing his motion for severance. As you may recall, Mr. Pryor, on behalf of Mr. Daybell, had filed a motion for severance previously. The court, Judge Boyce, denied that motion and said, we're going to go to trial in January. And the court previously denied a motion to continue on behalf of Mr. Pryor, where he wanted the trial set in October of 2023. The prosecution said, well, we could start in September of 2023. We're completely fine with that. But Lori Vallow would not waive her right to a speedy trial. Therefore, the court set January as the trial date. So what does this really mean? Well, first, Mr. Pryor says in his motion, at least so I've read, been told, because like I said, Idaho courts don't think we should have a copy of this anytime soon. It's only the most watched and talked about case going on right now, but it doesn't really matter. The American people are too stupid for these complex matters that are being discussed. Well, let me explain them for you then, because that's what the courts think. We're all too stupid. Mr. Pryor is saying that there is a substantial amount of investigation and preparation, along with a significant amount of evidence, he says, that he has still not received from the prosecutors. I'm sure the prosecutors are saying, oh, we're working on it, or we've turned it all over. That's their typical response. Anyway, he says, Mr. Pryor says there's no possible way to complete the investigation and be prepared for a death penalty case in January of 2023. And he says, obviously, the standard stuff. This is a death penalty case. It requires a unique amount of time. And let's face it, when it's a death penalty case, since it is the ultimate punishment, well, you get super due process, no doubt. And Mr. Pryor has said that, hey, I've been consuming my time on the investigation as the factual scenario here. But if we go to trial and we lose, then we're immediately going to go into the death penalty phase. And therefore, I need to start working on that, which I haven't already done. So, Judge, I'm going to need more time. So what does that really amount to? Well, he says, Judge, I'm not ready. And although he didn't say it, at least from what I've seen, he probably threw in that Mr. Daybell has an absolute right to effective assistance of counsel under the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution and the applicable Idaho Constitution as well. And therefore, Judge, if you want to make me ineffective, make me go to trial in January. It will be a free pass. Okay? It'll be a free do-over. So what do I think is going to happen in that regard? Well, I think the judge will have to grant the continuance. I hate to say it, but I think that's what's going to have to take place. I know the judge doesn't want to go to trial, and he doesn't want to do this trial twice. But if Lori Vallow doesn't waive speedy trial, then that's not going to happen. But more importantly is that a motion for severance has been filed. And the significance of the motion for severance, which has previously been denied, but can be renewed and should be renewed at every stages of the proceeding. Seriously, if Judge Boyce denies the motion for severance, Mr. Pryor would have to literally make a motion for severance each and every day before trial at the close of the prosecution's case in chief, as well as at the end of the defense case in chief, if one is presented, to continually renew the motion for severance. If they are convicted and if they have a joint trial and an appellate court determines that Mr. Pryor should have had a separate trial, guess what? You get a do-over all over again. Automatic reversal. Now, what is Mr. Pryor saying that would require a separate trial? Well, Mr. Pryor is alleging that his client, Chad Daybell, should not be tried with Lori Vallow because it would deprive his client of his constitutional right to present a complete defense. Now, Mr. Pryor apparently has alleged that he plans to introduce prior bad acts, 404B evidence, kind of reverse 404B evidence, for Ms. Vallow and Mr. Cox, Lori Vallow's deceased brother. Specifically, he's apparently going to introduce or attempt to introduce evidence regarding their relationship and the death of Mr. Cox. Mr. Pryor also noted that Chad Daybell is requesting obviously the continuance of the trial date, but that Lori Vallow has not waived her right to a speedy trial, and because of that, the cases should be separate. Mr. Daybell's attorney also argued that a joint trial would violate Chad's his constitutional rights. He notes in part that one of Chad's possible defenses would be to blame Lori Vallow and her brother in the conspiracy, and that wouldn't be fair to have Chad to be prosecuted as a co-defendant. Now, this is what I've said all along. I don't know why at this point in the proceedings it's taken so long to figure this out. It was rather simple. The way that Chad Daybell is going to raise a defense is that he didn't do it. Lori Vallow and her brother, Alex Cox, are the ones that did it. They're crazy, and he should be allowed to introduce that evidence. But that would be potentially prejudicial and unfair to Lori Vallow. It wouldn't necessarily come in any way. In fact, Lori Vallow could say that Chad Daybell was the one that did it in her trial. You would think everyone would want separate trials in this case, but I've seen nothing filed because we don't get to see anything filed in this case, which goes back to my biggest grievance about Idaho, is they all think we're a bunch of incompetent boobs and we can't handle it, and that this is somehow going to prejudice everybody in this case. It's ridiculous. Doesn't take a rocket scientist. A guy like me can figure it out, what the defense is going to be. Lori Vallow is going to say, I'm crazy. Chad Daybell is going to say, she did it, and she's crazy. I didn't know what she was doing. Did I mention that she's crazy? Everybody knows she's in the hospital. How is that going to prejudice anything? Really? Come on, Idaho. Get your act together. Now, for those who aren't familiar with this case, remember, Lori Vallow is charged in Arizona with conspiracy to murder her previous husband, Charles Vallow, who was shot to death by, that's right, Alex Cox, Lori Vallow's brother, weeks before the death of the children, Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's wife, who they all thought had some dark spirits in them, basically that they were possessed. Now, Alex Cox claimed self-defense in that shooting, but he mysteriously died in November of 2020, just a few months after the shooting, purportedly from natural causes. So, and as we noted, Boyce combined, and as we noted previously, Judge Boyce combined the trials of the husband and wife back in October of 2020. Pryor had previously filed a motion to sever in September of 2021, but Boyce denied that motion. Maybe it's just my frustration with not being able to see these motions, because it's just ridiculous the way they're doing things there. But yeah, I'm getting a little frustrated, okay? It's not, I don't understand what the secrets are. What is the big secret there in Idaho? Why do they keep acting like this is a big secret? Judge Boyce needs to realize this is just a case. It is one of many cases that will come through, and it should be treated like any other case. It doesn't need any special treatment. It doesn't need anything that would not be allowed by any other proceeding. And he is turning this thing into the biggest cluster that probably anyone has ever seen. He's going to join the wall of fame of worst judges. That's right next to Judge Lance Ito, the one who handled the O.J. Simpson trial. Turned a simple 3-week trial into an 8-month trial. We are now 3 years from when these children disappeared. 3 years. And really, we have accomplished nothing. Let's get to it, Idaho. And of course, it'll be interesting to see what position the prosecutor takes on these cases. What they should say is, fine, Chad Daybell, we'll see you in October if that's what you want. And Lori Vallow, we'll see you in January. Let's do this thing. But somehow, I don't think they're going to do it. But we've got some news. All right, so before we go ahead and get to that story, let's go ahead and open the record for October 13th of 2022. So we do know that a motions hearing was held for Chad Daybell on his matter today. Obviously, Lori Vallow's matters are all stayed because, well, competency issues have been addressed again. Now, Lori Vallow's attorneys were there to see what was going to take place, but there were several major issues addressed. First, the parties addressed the motion to continue filed by Chad Daybell. The government, as we've stated and we've talked about in great length in previous videos, doesn't object for all the reasons outlined in their previous motions. And oh, by the way, did I mention because it's really expensive? Judge Boyce did not issue a ruling from the bench and advised that he would take the matter under advisement and will issue a written opinion. The court briefly addressed the severance issues and the court made no decision. And what is worth noting is that there's reports that not only in the motion for severance that we have talked about, where Chad Daybell, through his attorney, referred to Lori Vallow Daybell as Miss Vallow, which I would note we have done from the beginning, well, just because it kept it cleaner. And I also didn't think that the relationship was going to last. And Chad is basically saying, Lori, it's not you, it's me, but we're breaking up. And why are they breaking up? Well, just once again to briefly recap from the motion for severance, based on the allegations in this case, one of the plainly available defenses would be to demonstrate that Ms. Vallow and her brother, Alex Cox, were responsible for the alleged crime, and they acted as part of their own conspiracy and did not involve Mr. Daybell. What's the best way to get that severance? Well, you need to distance yourself. What's the best defense? Say, oh, she did it. Been saying that all along. Well, we'll see. The court didn't issue a ruling just yet, but I think that Chad Daybell has made enough of a record at this point for a severance to be granted. But hey, who knows what's going on in Idaho? We'll have to wait and see. And then the court ultimately denied the motion for a bill of particulars, which Mr. Pryor asked for more information regarding the charging documents, unclear under which theory of prosecution the prosecution was going forward. And the judge denied that and said, you have all you need to know. Mr. Pryor referred to Lori Vallow as Ms. Vallow, not Miss Vallow Daybell, as she prefers to be called, and as, well, they've referred to her in the past. Now, oh yes, Lori Hellis, remember her? That's right, our hero. She had some motions before the court, which was basically to say, Judge, you need to unseal all those documents because you didn't do it correctly. And I have communicated briefly with Lori Hellis. She was driving, so we didn't have a chance to get into great detail. But as I understand it, the court is going to take the matter under advisement. And I also understand that the court was in somewhat of an awkward position when Lori Hellis pointed out that the court's most recent orders regarding sealing of documents complied with the law. And then the court somewhat had to acknowledge that, well, now you have to go back and decide what you're going to do with the previously sealed items where the law was not filed. So, like I said, Lori indicated to me that she was driving back to Boise, and I hope to have her on and at least talk with her to get all of the scoop straight from her directly. I still think there's a little bit of hope that the judge will realize the errors of his ways, but I think he will find a way to keep everything sealed so that, well, we don't get to see anything what's going on, which is just wrong.